The principle of conformity is not the driver of demand in a rural community.
Originating from deep inside the Rocky Mountains, transported through the power of the internet, and arriving inside your tiny earbuds. It's the Appraiser Coach Podcast, helping appraisers increase their efficiency, quality, and make more money. Here's the guy who makes it his life's mission to create value for real estate appraisers nationwide. Your host and the Appraiser Coach, Dustin Harris.
Welcome back, folks. Dustin Harris hanging out once again on the podcast here. Can't wait to reintroduce a great guest to you. It's been a couple weeks since she has been on, but first want to pause here to remind you we are sponsored by three great companies, one of them being OREP Insurance. OREP, of course, is the E&O insurance that I have been using for years. I was a little hesitant to switch, honestly. When I did, I was super glad I did. I'll tell you why in a few minutes. That's OREP Insurance, OREP.org. We're sponsored by Alamode. Alamode is the software that I have chosen to stay with for over 20 years. They help me get more done. It's alamode.com or 800 Alamode. And finally, DataMaster. DataMaster saving appraisers about 45 minutes on every stinking report that you do, which, by the way, we're going to be talking a little bit about today with my wonderful guest. It's datamasterusa.com, datamasterusa.com. Well, folks, a few weeks ago, I introduced you to a friend of mine, an amazing lady. And when I say friend, I mean a friend, a dear friend, love her to death. I've reached out to her several times over the last, decade or so since we've known each other. And she's always quick to help, always witty, always funny, always intelligible, very, very great person to know. Her name is Diana Jacob, and I want to welcome her back to the program. Diana, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dustin. If you want to feel good, just call you up and let you talk. I mean,
well,
I think I'm going to record your recording, and that way when somebody gets upset with me, I'm going to say, now listen to this before you speak.
I love it. Well, Diana has been an appraiser for over 3 decades. She's appraised in the state of Louisiana, where she resides today. She's also appraised in Texas and North Carolina and even 1 or 2 other states. She has all kinds of experience with appraisal, single family, multifamily, commercial properties, you name it. She's done review work. She's been a consultant for litigation. I know her as an AQB certified USPAP instructor. That's where I took a class from her years ago and still remember some of the details of that class. Good friend of mine. And we talked last time, Diana, about some of the changes that were happening with USPAP. But today I want to talk a little bit about this whole boilerplate. And if you don't mind, I'm going to start out with a little bit of, actually, let's define boilerplate. And then I'm going to tell you a quick story. What's boilerplate in your opinion?
Well, if you I went ahead and looked it up.
Nice, nice.
When in doubt, I always look it up. And one of the things that I saw, it said, it's any written text that can be reused in new context or applications without any significant changes to the original.
Okay.
So it's really used to refer to statements that are in contracts or computer codes, or it's in media. It's something that every time you do that type of task, you want to be sure is said and understood.
Great. So Diana, late 90s, I think it was 96 when I got my first trainee's license. And I don't know, a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, I sat for my exam and, put before the state board my example reports. And I remember very clearly, and, I was young and dumb and thought I had all that in a bag of chips. And when they came back, one of their biggest criticism of my 3 sample reports was too much boilerplate. Mm-hmm. And I thought, too much boilerplate, but it all applies. What do you want me to do? So talk to me, again, good idea or bad idea? Boilerplate in our reports.
I like it and I don't like it. And I'm going to say it both ways. I think there is an absolute place for boilerplating because we have to say certain things that, especially residential appraisers. Residential appraisers use forms with written addendums. And so in those narrative addendums, there's things that they have to say that expands what the fields in the form said. Sometimes there are things that have to be said because USPAP said to say it. For instance, an ignored, just been ignored for ever since it's come out, was the extraordinary assumption hypothetical condition. Mm-hmm. Standards tell us that if we're going to use one of those specific assumptions, then we need to be clear to the reader that by the use of that, they need to be warned that the contrary may affect their results. For instance, hypothetical condition. I mean, I always tell people, that's real simple. That's just an outright lie. And
Right.
it's okay to lie as long as you tell them you lie.
Right.
But you need to also tell them, now listen, you understand, because I lied to you when you drive up in your U-Haul trailer, that house isn't built that day. I just said it was. Now, it's going to be real pretty when it's done. But Lord, not today.
Right. Right.
That's just a lie. But I can only lie to you if it's reasonable. It's got to be legal. It has to be legal. I used to, before marijuana became legal all over the United States, it seems like, but I used to tell people, don't try to run a cash crop on growing pot, because that's not legal. You
Right.
can't base your income on that. But then they started
You can't use that example
legal in a
anymore.
lot of places, so that's not a good example anymore. We'll have
Right.
to use something else. But we have to. A hypothetical condition can only be used if it's reasonable and it's legal in use. Same thing with an extraordinary assumption. I cannot tell you how many people just abuse the word extraordinary assumption. And the problem with that is that we focus on the label. And we've never been required to label it. A lot of people don't know that still today, that you've never had to label a hypothetical condition or an extraordinary assumption. You have to make sure that there is an understanding about that specific condition. The condition is, I have dirt and I need to appraise it as if the house were built.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean I have to say hypothetically. Just means that I have to make clear that on this date, that's right.
What is what you're doing, and that it might affect value.
Exactly. And the same thing with an extraordinary assumption. Especially today when we are doing very limited observations, we're going to make some extraordinary assumptions, but we don't have to say the word extraordinary. Now, listen, you're not wrong if you say it, but you are wrong if you accuse somebody else of being wrong for not labeling it.
Right.
So you need to know that. But I do think, for instance, in that case, we need to have a boilerplate statement that says, by the use of this specific condition in this assignment, the client and all other intended users need to recognize that the analyses may be impacted if there is a different understanding to what I've said.
And based on your definition of boilerplate, would you agree with this statement, that there's nothing wrong with taking that same statement and reusing it in other reports that would have the same situation?
Exactly. And so that one of the things that I've tried to help appraisers understand is that, you need to have more than one template. You need to have a template for FHA, for VA, for conventional, for non-mortgage lending. You need to have templates where certain canned statements are appropriate. Now, for instance, one of the canned statements that I have boilerplated, canned, whatever you want to call it, I've always felt was necessary was that when I'm talking, for instance, about the site section, one of the things that I like to say is that the survey governs dimensions, site area, and FEMA flood delineation. Because it does. I'm going to give you what I think those dimensions are, but I may not have received a survey. It bugs me a little bit when people say survey not available, because did you ask? I mean,
it wasn't on my desk, Diane. I looked. It wasn't there.
They said, well, they didn't give it to me at the time of the assignment. I said, but did you ask for it? So, it's okay to say this is where I got my dimensions from, but the survey is governing any site dimension. And so if there is any variance as a result of a subsequent survey, any significant difference in what the appraiser has reported versus a survey that may subsequently be provided, also gives the appraiser the right to amend the conclusions of their site analysis and their site value.
Would you agree with this statement that boilerplates help appraisers to be more efficient?
I think they do if they're used properly. But for instance, I mean, it makes me crazy, and I see it so many times. The site area is not suitable for agricultural development, or the land is not suitable. I'll see this one. The land is not suitable for agricultural development. Well, the doggone lot's only 3,000 square feet. Who in their right mind is planning on planting hay there? I mean, that you don't put a crawfish farm on 3,000 square feet. I don't understand sometimes some of the reasoning that goes behind it. Say, well, my client wanted. Well, did you explain to your client it's a condo and you don't have a lot? Don't sit there and put that in there. Right. Sometimes I love what Will Rogers said. He said, common sense just ain't that common. And a lot of times the boilerplating that gets people in trouble, there was a man, he was a great appraiser. I'm even going to say his name because he's deceased. David Meester. I mean, he was a great appraiser. He died shortly after certification came about, but he was a writer and he was a great man. One of his appraisal reports I was reading, we did writing together, we did some work together, and one of his appraisal reports, he talked about how his report complied with, I mean, he complied, I swear, with the Constitution of the United States. He cited everybody. He cited state laws, local laws, this jurisdiction, you know, FHA, VA. I mean, it was a bulleted list. And I was like, David, did you really do all that? He says, well, it complies. I said, how do you know it complies? I mean, don't you think all these people have specific directions for a reason? Isn't it based on their risk and their investment? Why in the world do you want to open yourself up? I mean, Lord, you might as well be a marshmallow being dipped in a vat of chocolate. You're going to be completely covered and smothered and might be so hot you don't even get to taste it. Don't put yourself in a position of being accountable for more than what you need to. So when
don't
you
give yourself rope to be hung with, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, if I'm going to do an FHA, I don't want to be held accountable for a conventional and vice versa. And if I'm going to do a buyout, I'm going to be dealing with Yellow Book. I'm not going to be dealing with just use PAP. I'm also going to be dealing with Yellow Book. And I want to be real clear when I do that. So I really get nervous when I see things said. And then I am just shocked at how many people don't read 1-1 A when it talks about keeping up with the changes. Because for instance, here's what here's a statement that I saw in a report not too long ago. I pulled it up. This is a complete appraisal performed under USPAP.
Okay.
Now, did we ever say there was an incomplete appraisal? We never did. You know, we never had complete and incompletes, and that never was the report. That was the development. So there was a lot of misunderstanding. Another one I hear is the departure provision was not invoked in this complete appraisal. Okay. Well, to begin with, we don't have provisions anymore. We have rules, and we haven't departed. And I mean, the departure rule departed in 1999. So, you know, the dearly departed needs to be left to bed and, you know, let him rest. And then quit trying to raise him from the dead. He doesn't belong in your report. Another one that's a huge, just, I feel like scratches on a chalkboard is when somebody says the estimated market value is, or the market value estimate is. That got taken away from us in 1999. They didn't want us to use the word estimate when linked with the market value, because if you think about value, it's a probability. It's not an absolute. And when you think about the word estimate, well, that's, I think it might be. That's a guess. Why do I want to guess about that which I'm not sure of?
Right.
I mean, if there is no absolute, do I need to even make it worse and make it? And that's what the lawyers said. Now, they said it in a lot nicer language than I did. They had a lot of more expertise and polish when they write. But basically, what they were saying was, don't broaden your accountability, because we're already in a probability, and it needs to be a relatively close agreement. Now, the broader the distance between the adjusted sale prices, we're going to start talking about that and saying, how did you come up with this value when you have such a broad distance? And sometimes that happens because the insufficient quantity of data leaves us with very little to compare it to. I mean, I've often said in the rural market, another boilerplate verbiage I like to use is that the principle of conformity is not the driver of demand in a rural community.
Well, say that again.
The principle of conformity is not the driver of demand in a rural community.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know, I'm going to have different kinds of houses and different sizes of land areas, and I'm going to compare them because what I'm comparing is a lifestyle. It's a decision to not have the government tell me how to plant my rose bush so many feet from the house. It's a decision to say, I get to put here what I want to put here, and no board is going to tell me whether or not I can have a pink house or a yellow house. I'm going to build what I want to build. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be safe or things like that, but there's a reason for rural communities to be the way they are, and it is that expectation of privacy. It is that expectation of non-interference. It's a lifestyle. And what are they willing to give up? They're willing to give up the close proximities to the picture show, to the grocery store, to all these other places. They're going to have to drive a bit to go get there, but that's something they're willing to do. because they protect that area. Rural appraising is very difficult and very challenging because you have very few transactions, which is why we have to help the readers understand. This is what I had to work with. Doesn't mean I can't come up with a credible opinion of value and that you can't rely on it, but you're going to see some spreads of adjustments and maybe that I would not be happy with. And I for the longest time I thought I had to be absolute perfect in every which way I could, and then I didn't know I could say this appraisal report stinks. But you can. Right. You can say, I had such a minimal amount of data that this is what I had to do within the appraisal process to make it work. And boilerplate language is designed to help us cover the points that were not necessarily incidental to the number crunching, but they were critical and relevant to the understanding of the appraisal process.
And isn't that really the reason why, as appraisers, we have job security? I mean, the fact that you can crunch those numbers all day long, but it takes an unbiased third party to step back and analyze and say, okay, what are we really dealing with here?
Yes, yes. I had a statement. It said, a full appraisal was completed in compliance with USPAP. I said, a full appraisal? You did a full. When did you ever do half full? Did you ever do a quarter? What do you mean you did a full? I mean, people will say things and you go, are you serious? Another one, the cost approach wasn't developed because Fannie Mae doesn't require it. Really?
Yeah. Now Fannie Mae's dictating how we appraise, right?
Yeah. So you start seeing some of those. Another one is I've got a beef with. The cited source of the market value definition is USPAP. USPAP has never defined market value. It tells you what a definition of market value should have. So I think what we need is to take a deep breath and ask ourselves, if a non-appraiser who was a user of appraisal services was reading this appraisal report in a mortgage lending world, could they understand it? If I'm doing a private appraisal for a private, now I have to help them understand a little more. We have an appraisal process, and I think personally, it's always a good idea when we write. If you want to boilerplate something, boilerplate the appraisal process. Put that in the body of every written appraisal report you do so that they understand this is how it works right up front. I have to define the problem. I have to figure out when I define the problem, how I'm going to go and solve that problem. Talk about what that scope of work is, and then just move it on down the list. I have to go in and I have to gather my data. I've got specific data. I've got general data. When they see the appraisal process, I had one client one time tell me, this was years ago, but it stuck with me. He said, I used to think, how come I'm having to pay so much for her to drive around, take a few pictures, and write a report? Right. Then I read your report and I thought, man, there's no way I'd do what you're doing. And certainly not for as little as you're doing it. I said, well, I accept bonuses. You want to pay me a little polish for my nails, I'll take it. Go for it.
Love it.
We have to do what we need to make sure, for instance, exposure time. Where is that written? We need to be able to say things about exposure time. And the other thing that bothers me a lot of times is that appraisers will not see the opportunity in ranges, and exposure time is one of them.
Right.
If we're trying to make sure people understand it's a high and a low, why do we want to go with anything in between? That targets us. I'm not saying don't be specific, but when you can be general, and sometimes it's more important to be general. Right. I think it's extremely important that people understand we have seasons of the year, and seasons of the year have impact on our marketing. So we need to be able to say in that boilerplate language, this season of the year may have a different response in terms of number of transactions and things like that.
Love it. We're talking with Diana Jacob, great friend of mine, USPAP instructor and intelligent, experienced appraiser. I want to pause here and remind you that we're sponsored by 3 great companies that will help you to be a better, more intelligent appraiser. One of them being a la mode helping you to do more with less. That means you're able to be efficient and effective and not cut your quality. If anything, increase the quality with the great tools that are available at the appraiser's fingertips. Folks, there's a reason that they lead the industry and have for years as the most sold, most used appraisal software out there. If you're with any other company, I encourage you to take a peek at Alamode. It's alamode.com or 800 Alamode. Speaking of great software that will help you to be a more efficient, more effective, and higher quality appraiser, DataMaster is helping you to do all of that. Folks, this is a company invented by appraisers for appraisers in Utah. Great company. I've had an opportunity to talk with the founder, the president, the CEO, Rick Lifford, for many hours on end. In fact, he and I have had, sat down, had many meals together. Here is a guy who understands and gets it when it comes to appraisers. Folks, if you want a tool that it can help you to be better at what you do, and you're great at what you do, if you want to be better, Rick and DataMaster can help you to do that. It's datamasterusa.com. One more time, it's datamasterusa.com. And finally, folks, we're sponsored by the greatest company out there, the one helping appraisers to be protected, the one giving many, many benefits. If you go to their website and check out the benefits tab of OREP Insurance, you'll wonder why you're with anyone else. OREP is the place to be. It's where I've been for several years. Very glad I moved to OREP. My premium has dropped over the years, and my coverage has increased, and the amount of benefits that I receive has also increased. Check them out. Go to orep.org. That's OREP.org. One more time, orep.org. Welcome back, welcome back all to the Appraiser Coach podcast. We're sitting down today with Diana Jacob, good friend of mine, a very intelligent appraiser, helping appraisers to be better. I hope you're taking notes, my friends, because this is great information. Diana, welcome back to the program, first of all.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate you being on. In addition to your work as a USPAP instructor, last time you were on the program, we talked about your many years spent with the Texas board, helping appraisers become more educated, keep themselves out of trouble, or if they find themselves in trouble, to get a little mentorship. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned about appraisers and the appraisal experience from your experience as a mentor.
The first thing I would say, and I've said it at the foundation meetings, and I've said it to numbers of appraiser user groups, I have only in my lifetime met one appraiser who absolutely didn't give a darn. Just was out there for whatever he could get. In fact, one time when I commented on a report that he had written, he said, "How much more are you willing to pay me to say all of that?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell you, we only pay one fee, and that's to get it right the first time." So this is not a trial by error. I'll pay you more if you say more. Outside of that person, every appraiser I've ever, I love speaking with appraisers. They're the most intelligent group of people. They're very analytical, defensive. Yes. Why? Because you have to defend yourself every day. So they're a little ouchy, sometimes, especially the more seasoned they get. But what I have found is that they want to do a good job. They really do want to do a good job. And they like earning your trust. They work hard at earning your trust. And when they don't have that, when they get accused of, just running out there, taking a few pictures and writing down a number. I mean, I've had a lot of appraisers that, when I ask them, where'd you get that number? Where did that come from? Well, that's my opinion. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, did you just wake up and become all knowing one day? Because I know I didn't, that used to drive me with effective age. I was like, how'd you get that? Well, I just know. Well, did you go get vaccinated or something? I mean, when do you reach the point when you just know? And the truth of the matter is, it is a group of people who have gathered as many facts possible, but then they put on their thinking hats. Somebody asked me one time, they were questioning a little bit about my fee. And they say, well, I just don't see how it would take you that long to do what you did. I said, did you add up my thinking time?
Right.
And they were like, what do you mean? I said, well, I thought while I was doing this appraisal. Now, if you wanted something without thinking time, I could charge you a whole lot less, But we, what you get is the summation of my thoughts, not all the thinking that went into it. And appraisers do a lot more. That's why I like people like DataMaster. I like people who offer analytical assistance, because appraisers can save themselves time because they know what matters and they put it in those systems, and then they are able to take that brilliant analytical judgment that they have and make it make sense. And that's, I just don't think I've met anybody else that as a whole, as a group, really works so hard at trying to do the right thing, to make it right. Now, we get beat up a lot, and we have a lot of bad examples, but you know what? There's not a profession I know of where you don't have some bad apples.
I agree with you. I think appraisers in general are trying to be the best they can.
I do.
They're trying to do a good job. Where do you find are some of maybe the one or two biggest, most common pitfalls that appraisers find themselves in?
Highest and best use. I say it every time.
Yeah, you didn't even hesitate there.
No, every time. I'm dealing with one right now. I mean, we get off the phone, I got to get back and do a little more chiseling, and say, okay, we breeze by that analytical process. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, I'm looking at one right now. It's a review of a review. And the original appraiser says one thing and the reviewer is saying another. And they both say it's a different market, but they're all within the same boundary. So you have sub-markets within this market. And so I said, where's their highest best use? And I'm reading both, trying to figure out where both. Neither one of them did.
Yeah.
Neither one of them showed it. Now, this doesn't mean that somebody's not right, but it means that there's no evidence that they went through that thought process. So that's the very first one that I would say is lacking. If you understand truly what highest and best use, what you may find out is that house doesn't belong on that lot.
Right. So what would you recommend as we close up here, Diana? What suggestions do you have for appraisers? What can we do to up our game?
I think you get somebody who is a non-interested party, who maybe doesn't even know who you are, and say, tell me what I didn't say. When we hand our reports to other appraisers, they read that with their appraiser eyes. Give it to somebody who isn't an appraiser and say, did you understand that? Did you know what I was saying here? I've always thought we needed two pairs of eyes to look at our reports. One, appraisers, but we also need to have a user's eyes. And then if you are weak in an area, if you really don't know how to get that number, that adjustment, if you really don't know how to come up with that effective age, if you really don't know how to do highest and best use, run to the nearest educational offering you can find. Maybe you have to take 2 or 3 of them because not everybody's really good at what they do when they explain it. They all say it differently. So, I've taken courses that were the same title, same subject from 3 and 4 different providers because I wanted everybody's perspective, not just the one, so that I could be the best I could be.
Diana, thank you. This has been wise advice, and we as listeners need to take heed and start to implement some of these things. I think the best advice I heard you give today is that we just need to read what we wrote and then ask ourselves, did I really mean that? did I really mean to say that? Yeah, absolutely. Diana, how do people get a hold of you? And tell us a little bit about what you have out there to help appraisers.
Well, I do some teaching. I do some consulting work. I do write a few textbooks and teach a few classes. You can reach me at dianatjacob@yahoo.com. DianaTJacob, Jacob @yahoo.com. I'll give you my cell number, 210-363-5950. I may not answer you within the next hour or 2 hours. I had somebody call me within 24 hours say, I sent you something last night at 8 o'clock and I have not heard from you yet. And I was like,
give me a minute.
I get up at 4:30, but I usually head to the Bible and do my devotion first before I start opening the emails, because if I don't, I end up putting God last and I'm putting it first because I can't handle talking to people like you unless I have that right frame of mind.
I love it.
So there you go.
I love it, my friend. Thank you so much.
Oh, we're supposed to do that on. Okay.
Oh,
you can
it's
edit that out.
we'll leave it in. It'll be okay. All right, my friend. Thank you so much, and we will do it again soon. Okay. That was Diana Jacob, a great friend of mine and a very knowledgeable individual, and somebody you should reach out to. Get to know her better. She will bless your life. Trust me, folks. Thanks again for joining us, and we will catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Appraiser Coach podcast with Dustin Harris. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and post a short review on iTunes. For more in-depth insider information on how you can make more money as a real estate appraiser, visit theappraisercoach.com and sign up for the All-Star team today. Thanks for joining us. And now, get out there and create some value.